Welcome to Daily Drive for Monday, June 15th, 2026. I'm Kellen Walker in Las Vegas. Today on the show, EV registrations are still down, but the market is stabilizing. The Dow strike is officially over, and Tesla is under fire in Europe over its self-driving safety data. Plus, Factorial Energy CEO Siyu Huang says the company's solid-state battery technology is closer to mass market than most people think.
With the reality that the solid has naturally a higher energy density, you can either having the same volume with longer range, or you have the same energy with a smaller weight and a lighter weight and a smaller pack.
Let's run through all the news you need to know to keep up in the auto industry. U.S. EV registrations are stabilizing after last fall's loss of federal tax credits, but the recovery is still a work in progress. According to the latest data from S&P Global Mobility, new EV registrations fell 9.8% in April compared to a year ago. On one hand, that sounds like a big drop, but it's also the smallest year-over-year decline of 2026. Tesla led the way. Its Model Y was up 61%, and its overall market share climbed to 51%. But analysts say Tesla faces a challenge ahead without new models on the way. We'll have more on the story in a moment with our own Lindsay Van Hully. The UAW's two-week strike at Dow Corporation's axle plant in Three Rivers, Michigan is officially over. Local 2093 members voted 704 to 173 to ratify a new four-year deal that boosts wages 36%. Plus, workers get new paid holidays, a $2,000 ratification bonus, and no health care premium increases. About 1,000 workers walked off the job June 1st. Dow's largest customers include GM and Stellantis, both of which said last week the strike had not affected their operations. Tesla is facing serious scrutiny in Europe over its push to expand full self-driving technology across the continent. Reuters reports that Tesla presented self-published safety data to regulators in Sweden and the Netherlands that independent researchers say is highly misleading. The data includes flawed comparisons to U.S. crash statistics, inflated claims, and an unrealistic assumption that every American vehicle would be replaced by an FSD-enabled Tesla. The Dutch regulator approved FSD in April and is now seeking EU-wide approval, but a European transport safety watchdog is calling on Tesla to have its data independently verified. Joining me now to talk more about those EV registration numbers is Lindsay Van Hully, Deputy Editor here at Automotive News. Lindsay, welcome back to Daily Drive.
Hi, Kel. Happy to be here.
All right, Lindsay, so it's difficult these days to get a clear picture of the EV market from the raw data, especially after the end of federal tax incentives. What are your big takeaways from the latest release from S&P?
I think the biggest thing really is just the smallest decline in April that they've logged so far this year. And I think what that shows is a sign that the market is beginning to stabilize after the loss of federal tax credits last fall. So for context, the registration data S&P Global Mobility provides monthly. It's sort of a proxy for sales because not all EV makers, including Tesla, report U.S. results separately or sales monthly. So it gives us a look at just the share of EVs that are registered each month. And so in January, they were down 41% year over year. In February, 37%. In March, 25%. In April, just 9.8%. So as you can see, the decline is dropping each month. And what that's sort of signaling is that the number of new EVs registered in the US is at its highest point so far this year. And analysts I talked to said, it's showing a sign of a gradual inching up, and that's likely what we're going to continue to see for a while as the market really finds its footing. There's a lot of news that we've seen over the last several months about some EVs leaving the US market, some brands bringing new ones, a lot of emphasis on internal combustion vehicles and hybrid vehicles. And so there's been a shift in the mix that we're seeing that brands are focusing on. And a lot of that has still kind of created sort of an uncertain time as far as where EVs are ultimately going to go. But I think what that's showing is that there's an improvement in EVs that are being registered month to month. And one of the things that S&P pointed out is that Tesla actually had a good month, and it was a big contributor to that. Registrations of new Teslas were up 13%. Its volume leader, the Model Y, was up 61%. But even the higher end Model S and Model X that Tesla has said it's going to discontinue had higher registrations in April. And S&P Global Mobility pointed to a lot of the metrics around Tesla over the last year have begun to recover and seen some strength there for sure in April.
Now, Ford was down sharply while Toyota and Subaru were surging. What's driving that swing, and what does it tell us about where the EV market is headed?
So it's interesting. Other brands were mixed, right? And to your point, that there were some that were down sharply, there were others that were up, and I think that gets to what analysts were talking about as far as the sort of that unsettled landscape. So Ford, their registrations overall were down 27%, but registrations of the Mach-E crossover were up 17%. So the Ford story, I think, is sort of around the Mach-E now really being its main consumer EV model after Ford said it was going to end production of the F-150 Lightning pickup. And so the Mach-E is sort of doing a lot of the work in Ford's EV portfolio right now, while it's still continuing to work on future models. Toyota, Lexus, Subaru had some new models that are on sale. They've been an interesting story because they are bringing new models into a market without a federal tax credit for over a year, helped kind of offset those upfront prices by about $7,500. Toyota's put a lot of incentives on those new models when they launched to really help build momentum around their EV lineup. But we're seeing a lot of momentum there, at least in the month of April, having these new models on the market that are kind of helping drive that consideration.
Perfect. Lindsay Van Hully, always great to have you. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Cal.
Solid-state batteries have been the great promise of the EV industry for years. Lighter, safer, and potentially cheaper than the lithium-ion packs powering today's vehicles. Siyu Huang is the founder and CEO of Factorial Energy, which recently went public on NASDAQ under the ticker FAC, and is developing solid-state battery technology in partnership with Mercedes-Benz, Stellantis, Hyundai, and Kia. She joined our own Molly Boygan on the Shift podcast to explain how the technology works, why it makes EVs lighter and potentially less expensive, and how geopolitical tensions are shaping when and whether solid-state batteries reach the mass market. Here's a piece of that conversation.
Siyu Huang, founder and CEO of Factorial Energy, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Molly. Great to meet you.
So Factorial recently announced that it completed a business combination with a SPAC and has begun trading on NASDAQ. So why is now a good time for Factorial to go public?
Well, we're very excited. We were public on Monday, and we're trading under the ticker FAC and FACWW right now. Become a public company definitely supports our next phase of technology development, customer qualification, and manufacturing scale up. And this is a very critical moment for Factorial to be able to commercialize our first technology and be able to scale tremendously over the next few years.
When you speak about that commercialization strategy, battery startups have in the past struggled to sort of get from the lab to manufacturing scale. So how do you think Factorial is different?
Well, as you are very familiar with the battery industry, there are a lot of noise and hype there. And it's really difficult to tell technology from one versus the other. Some are claiming higher energy density, higher cycle life, and great temperature window, etc. But on the other side, it's also very easy to tell. It's all about the validation. I think automotive validation is probably one of the most credible validation you have, because automotive customers have been one of the most demanding customers in the battery space. So I would say looking at customer validation is definitely paramount in differentiating a battery company versus others. For Factorial, we not only have a track record to deliver high-performing solid-state battery, which comes in with higher energy density compared with lithium-ion, with up to 80% higher, um, which means it's lighter, smaller battery pack that goes for longer range. At the same time, we also have substantial validation and backing from automotives. Hyundai, Kia, they were our first investor in the company. Mercedes, Stellantis led the $200 million investment into the company a few years ago as well. And last year, we built the world's first solid-state lithium metal vehicle with Mercedes together. And Mercedes, after months of testing, they actually took on a historical drive from Stuttgart all the way to Malmo, Sweden, with 1,205-kilometer range, and made history for Mercedes. And that's only one small part of our journey. And we have an even broader and more exciting cadence coming up. And not only for automotive, we also received strong validation from our drone customers, which is a new area we're expanding recently.
You mentioned these development agreements with Mercedes-Benz, Stellantis, Hyundai, and Kia, and that the auto industry players are so demanding relative to other industries. How do you manage the competing priorities and timelines of these different automakers? Because, you hear that list and they're very different.
Oh, absolutely. Some are premium automakers, some are more mass market players. And we also recently received the first production program from a US supercar maker called Karma Automotive. They're even higher in premium brand than a lot of the major mainstream premium brands out there. The beauty for battery is that this is a foundational layer for energy across mobility, across energy storage, and even for the future of the space exploration, right? It's a foundational layer. There are a lot of synergies, especially when it comes to high performance, high energy, high power batteries. And when it comes to high energy density, it has both a definition of high energy on a volumetric and gravimetric perspective. So basically means the energy that's housed under the same volume or the same weight. If you have a higher volumetric energy density, this means that with the same space you're having, you can extend the range of the vehicle substantially. So this plays into the story of a lot of this premium vehicle fleet. And for example, the Mercedes vehicle, they had like 800-kilometer range with the EQS that's being a flagship vehicle in their fleet. And with our vehicle, we're able to extend that to 1,205 kilometers with the vehicle that Mercedes built that was powered by Factorial solid-state battery cells. However, when it comes to like a mass market vehicle, they could very well take in a different approach. For example, we launched a demonstration fleet with Stellantis last year. We made a press release last year that we're going to be on track to deliver a vehicle in 2026 as part of the demonstration fleet. So this could come into a completely different design, right? With the same energy, we could deliver a lighter pack, which eventually will be able to drive down the cost of the vehicle. And this is really important for our customers to not only to reduce the cost for our end consumers, especially for those heavy pickup trucks and big, large SUVs, but also be able to create value for our OEM customers. And we can also share the value creation with our OEM customers.
You were saying that those smaller packs will eventually lower the cost for mass market vehicles. What about in the meantime? How are the partnerships for those mass market manufacturers delivering lower cost vehicles than the premium manufacturers if, as you say, there's sort of this foundational energy layer with commonalities across manufacturers?
So the battery chemistry could be the same. Back in 24, we shipped the large format cell to Mercedes. That was one of the first B sample shipment among all the solid state players. That cell came in with 390 watt per kilogram energy density. It's more than 100 amp hour cell in capacity as well. And The Stellantis cell they released last year with 375 watt-hour per kilogram, and it's a little bit smaller cell. It's around 80 amp hour in terms of capacity. And however, the chemistry are very similar to each other. It doesn't have demand a different chemistry, just based on different cell design, different dimension, and especially in a different pack dimension. The chemistry is actually the same, but with the reality that the cell has naturally a higher energy density, you can either having the same volume with longer range, or you see have the same energy with a smaller weight and a lighter weight and a smaller pack. And this is actually one stone for two birds. And you can play in the premium sector or you can play in the mass market sector. And even when it comes to like air mobility, for example, we have the drone players and it can even go in further extreme that we can even take out cycle life requirement, can building even more aggressive energy density and with much higher payload and much longer range as well.
Factorial Energy CEO Siyu Huang spoke with our own Molly Boygan. You can hear the full conversation on the latest episode of Shift, available now wherever you get your podcasts. That's Daily Drive for today. I'm Kellen Walker. Thanks to Automotive News executive producer Jake Neer, as well as our own Lindsay Van Hully for her reporting for today's podcast. We also had reporting from Kurt Nagel of our sibling publication, Crane's Detroit Business. You can get the latest news on EV sales trends, battery technology, and everything happening in the auto industry at autonews.com. We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you think of the show and the topics we covered today. Send us an email at dailydrive@autonews.com or leave us a voicemail at 313-444-2774. And if you enjoyed the podcast, remember to like, leave a review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.